It began with a whisper, a soft ping on royal reporters' encrypted apps, a rumor, then another, and then the silence. The kind of silence that only ever means one thing in royal circles. Something very, very serious has happened. And this time, it was about Prince Harry. Yes, that Prince Harry. The Duke of Sussex. The rebel royal. The soldier. The father. The exile. The man who once stood proudly beside his brother in a crisp military uniform. Now reportedly collapsed inside a luxury Montecito estate, needing immediate medical attention. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And within minutes, the palace confirmed it. Prince Harry had suffered what insiders are calling a severe mental health crisis. Rushed to a private facility. No camera flashes. No public statement. Just a tightly controlled message from Buckingham Palace confirming a medical emergency. Carefully worded, painfully vague. But behind that sterile phrase, a story so shocking, so emotionally raw, it sent shudders through the entire royal infrastructure and sent Meghan Markle spiraling into silence. What happened in those final moments before Harry's collapse? Why did royal protection officers in California suddenly spring into action at 3:17 a.m.? And why did King Charles reportedly lock down communications from Clarence House just 15 minutes later? You're about to find out. Because over the next hour, we're going to uncover a series of disturbing events, starting with a mysterious phone call, a hushed royal emergency protocol codenamed Alabaster, a night of terrifying hallucinations, and a royal brother's unexpected arrival that may have shattered years of animosity. And it all began just 3 minutes ago. Let's back up for just a moment. Why does this matter so much now? Because this isn't just about one man having a bad day. This is about the emotional unraveling of one of the world's most famous figures. A man born into royalty, thrust into the global spotlight before he could even speak, and then, somehow, expected to live a normal life. It's about the toll of trauma, about the price of fame, about the crushing weight of family secrets, global scrutiny, and a marriage that, according to insiders, might be facing its most serious reckoning yet. And for the very first time, we have real, raw insight into just how bad things have become for Prince Harry. So let me ask you something. Have you ever seen someone spiral while everyone smiled around them? Have you ever watched a person who used to light up rooms suddenly look like they're carrying 100 pounds on their shoulders? Because that's what royal watchers have been noticing for weeks now. The vacant eyes, the tight smiles, the way Harry flinches, ever so slightly, when asked about his family, the canceled appearances, the delayed projects, the conspicuous silence from Meghan. Something's been building, quietly, dangerously, and then the dam broke. But before we get into the events of that night, the night the Duke of Sussex was rushed to a private clinic under armed escort, we need to trace the steps that led him there. We need to look at the pressure cooker that had been simmering for months, the secret arguments, the legal threats, the unexpected visit from a high-profile American therapist, and the one decision Meghan allegedly made that insiders now believe was the final emotional blow. Let's rewind to the beginning of the week. Sources close to the Sussex household say that Harry was already in a deeply fragile mental state. He had reportedly been struggling with insomnia, erratic mood swings, and bouts of emotional withdrawal. One staff member, speaking under condition of anonymity, said they hadn't seen Harry this emotionally shut down since the day he walked behind his mother's coffin. That alone should tell you how serious this was. Meghan, according to palace sources, had been encouraging him to take a step back, to rest, to reflect, but others claim she was distracted, juggling public appearances, brand deals, and planning a high-profile solo event. She was trying to play both roles, one insider said, wife and brand. But Harry needed something more, something deeper, and he wasn't getting it. Then came the phone call. No one knows who was on the other end. Not yet. But what we do know is this. After that call, Harry disappeared into his study for nearly 3 hours. When he emerged, he reportedly looked pale, disoriented, and distant. He mumbled something about everything falling apart. Then he collapsed. At this point, the timeline gets chillingly specific. 3:17 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Emergency services are called. But it's not 911. It's a private security channel used only by high-net-worth individuals and diplomatic families. 3:22 a.m., a blacked-out SUV arrives at the Montecito residence. No lights, no markings. Inside, a two-person emergency response team from a private psychiatric facility known only to a few Hollywood elites. 3:34 a.m. Harry is carried out on a stretcher, partially conscious. He's muttering something. The words, "not again," are heard. A female voice is heard sobbing, but it's not Meghan. 3:50 a.m. The SUV reaches the clinic. Entry is made through a back gate, bypassing the main entrance. A royal protection officer, reportedly from the UK, is seen following closely. 4:06 a.m. Buckingham Palace is informed. 4:12 a.m. The first encrypted message goes out to select press under a blackout until further notice order. And then, complete silence. Until now. You see, there's something terrifying about silence in royal media. When things go quiet, it's never accidental. It means crisis. It means scrambling. It means the very foundations of the firm are being shaken behind closed doors. And in this case, it meant Prince Harry's health had become a matter of national, even international, concern. But the real question is, what triggered this collapse? And here's where things get even more disturbing. Multiple sources, including two separate individuals close to the Sussex team, have confirmed that Meghan had delivered Harry an ultimatum just hours before the incident. An ultimatum involving custody. That's right, custody. According to these insiders, the couple had been fighting about more than public image, more than Spotify, more than Netflix. The real issue had become their children, and how Meghan allegedly wanted them raised entirely in the US, with no further contact with the royal family. Ever. This, according to people who know Harry well, broke him. He feels torn between his past and his future, one source said. He's terrified his kids will never know where they come from, that they'll never feel connected to the parts of himself he's tried to leave behind but can't. So when Meghan reportedly told him she was preparing legal documentation to permanently sever all royal ties for their children, it hit him like a freight train. And less than 12 hours later, he was in a private psychiatric facility, sedated, fragile, and under evaluation. So where's Meghan now? Why has the palace been so vague? Why are reports of a mental health emergency being scrubbed from the internet as fast as they appear? And what role, if any, did Prince William play in this sudden collapse? Because, as you'll see very soon, William's reaction may have shocked even the most hardened royal aides. And it may reveal a deep, emotional bond that has been secretly trying to rebuild itself, one desperate message at a time. But that part of the story, it's coming next. And what happened when William appeared at the clinic door, unannounced, unguarded, and reportedly in tears, will leave you speechless. Because what he whispered to Harry in that moment was not just a message of brotherly love. It was a warning, a plea, and possibly the beginning of a rescue plan. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What do you say to someone who's already standing at the edge? What words could possibly anchor a man unraveling, not just from pressure, but from pain no one else seems to understand? That was the question Prince William found himself asking as he stood just outside the clinic door, heartbeat pounding in his ears, royal protocol be damned. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Because before that silent, tension-filled confrontation came the moment everything snapped. The moment the palace had been dreading. The moment no one, not even Meghan, saw coming. Prince Harry's sudden collapse wasn't theatrical. It wasn't explosive. It was, according to those who witnessed it, terrifying in its stillness. Let's break it down minute by minute. Friday, 2:47 p.m., Montecito Estate, Sussex residence. Harry had been in his home office since morning. No meetings, no cameras, just silence. Staff described him as visibly tense, pacing the hallway, his jaw clenched, hands trembling slightly. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept. There was an untouched espresso going cold on his desk, the third that day. Earlier, a secure envelope had been delivered. A courier with no uniform. No words exchanged. The envelope had no return address, only a royal cipher, faint but unmistakable. Harry took one look at the seal and closed the blinds. And then, for nearly 3 hours, no one saw him. Not his assistant. Not his security detail. Not even the private therapist Meghan had allegedly arranged to check in that afternoon. When he finally emerged, he didn't speak. He just stood there, in the center of the hallway, staring down at a family portrait from 1997. Diana, William, himself. Then he collapsed. The sound that triggered it all. What's strange, according to one housekeeper, is that there wasn't a scream. No dramatic fall. Just a soft, gut-wrenching thud, like a heavy suitcase dropped on a hardwood floor. When the staff rushed in, they found him on his knees, trembling, lips pale, eyes glazed. He was whispering something. They leaned in closer. And that's when they heard it. Not again. Don't make me do this again. I didn't want this. Over, and over, and over. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shouting. He was somewhere else. Like he'd slipped into a memory so painful, it pulled him out of the present entirely. And the scariest part? He didn't seem to recognize anyone in the room. Not even the guard he'd known since his final year in the army. 3:14 p.m., private medical protocol activated. This is where things get eerily calculated. Unlike a typical emergency call, Meghan's team didn't dial 911. Instead, a secure line was used, one connected to a Los Angeles-based private psychiatric crisis network that caters to high-profile clientele. Why is this significant? Because it means they were prepared for this. Someone had anticipated this kind of breakdown and had quietly installed a rapid response plan, complete with non-disclosure agreements for medics and protocols for rerouting paparazzi drones. Within 4 minutes, a vehicle was en route. Blacked out. No license plates. Carrying 2 elite crisis responders, trained not just in psychiatry, but royal discretion. 3:33 p.m., Meghan nowhere to be found. Perhaps the most jarring part of this entire timeline? Meghan Markle was not in the house. In fact, according to flight trackers and paparazzi tip-offs, she had just landed in Austin, Texas. Alone. What was she doing there? That's still under intense speculation. Some say she was attending a last-minute meeting for her upcoming lifestyle brand. Others believe she was quietly negotiating a solo documentary project, a project that didn't include Harry. But whatever the reason, she was 1,500 miles away as her husband was lifted into a reinforced SUV, half-conscious and mumbling about being trapped. The optics? Devastating. And the silence from her team? Deafening. 4:02 p.m., arrival at a discreet, high-security psychiatric facility. Here's where things get even stranger. The SUV didn't go to a hospital. Not Cedars-Sinai. Not UCLA Medical. Instead, it turned down a side road in Santa Barbara, leading to a nearly invisible estate, surrounded by 12-foot hedges and guarded by ex-military personnel. This location isn't listed publicly, but insiders say it's part of a hush-hush restoration clinic used by A-list celebrities, politicians, and yes, even former heads of state. When they experience what's euphemistically referred to as a high-stress episode. Harry was checked in under a code name. Room 7A. No personal devices. No press access. No digital record. Inside the clinic, the whispers begin. We managed to obtain whispered statements, anonymously, from someone connected to the clinic staff. And what they saw was chilling. Harry was reportedly catatonic upon arrival, unable to form coherent sentences, staring blankly at the wall. When asked if he knew where he was, he reportedly answered, "I thought I was in Kensington." But she wasn't there. Where is she? The she he was referring to? Staff believe he meant his mother, Princess Diana. Let that sink in. In his lowest moment, Harry believed he was back in the palace, and that Diana had vanished. One nurse reported that he kept repeating a chilling sentence for nearly 10 minutes. They took her, and now they'll take the rest. 4:37 p.m., Palace is notified. Charles's reaction stunned staff. When the call came through to Buckingham Palace, it didn't go to an assistant. It went directly to King Charles. According to our sources, the king was on a private call when the message flashed on his encrypted screen. He read it, paused, then said only one word: alabaster. This, according to former royal aides, is a rarely used code phrase designed to lock down internal communication, suppress press leaks, and trigger an emergency meeting among royal crisis handlers. It's only ever been activated twice before. After Diana's fatal crash in 1997, and during Queen Elizabeth's final hours in 2022. Now, it had been activated for Harry. Think about that. The monarchy now viewed this not as a family issue, but as a state-level vulnerability. Back in Montecito. Confusion, then chaos. As the news slowly leaked to select journalists under strict embargo, chaos erupted in the Sussex household. Staff were panicking. Security scrambled to reinforce digital communications. Aides began scrubbing call logs, email drafts, and visitor logs. Because suddenly, they realized something chilling. This wasn't just a mental health scare. It was the collapse of a fragile ecosystem that had been holding itself together with tape and PR smiles. And for all the therapists and mindfulness apps in the world, nothing could prepare them for what was about to unfold. Because across the Atlantic, someone else was already on the move. And when Prince William arrived, alone, unannounced, not even the clinic staff were prepared for what happened next. He didn't come with royal guards. He didn't come with press. He came with one item, a letter from Diana, found buried in the Windsor archives just weeks earlier. And what he whispered to Harry when he stepped into that hospital room would ignite a firestorm neither brother could stop. But what came next would shatter more than just their bond. It would expose secrets the monarchy buried long ago, secrets that someone was willing to kill to keep hidden. Who was really on the other end of that line? That's the question everyone keeps asking. And it's the one question the palace refuses to answer. Because phone calls don't usually destroy people. Words do. And this one, according to multiple insiders, didn't just wound Prince Harry. It split him open. The call came in quietly. No ringtone echoing through the Montecito estate. No dramatic interruption. Just a vibration on Harry's phone, placed face down on his desk, right beside that untouched espresso. At first, he ignored it. He'd been doing that a lot lately. Letting messages pile up, calls go unanswered, the outside world blurred into background noise. But this time, something made him flip the phone over. The screen lit up. No name. Just a number he hadn't seen in years. An international line. Encrypted. Untraceable to the public. Harry froze. This wasn't a spam call. This wasn't a PR team. This wasn't even family, at least not officially. This was someone who knew how to reach him without leaving a trail. And that's when his breathing changed. Short, shallow, controlled. The way soldiers breathe when they sense incoming fire. He stared at the phone for nearly a full minute. Then he answered. The first thing he heard wasn't a voice. It was silence. Not dead air. Not static. Just someone there. Breathing. Hello, Harry said, his voice already strained. Still nothing. Then, finally, a voice came through, low, calm, deliberate. You should sit down. Those 5 words hit him like a punch to the chest. Because whoever it was didn't ask how he was. Didn't say hello. Didn't soften the moment. They knew. They knew what they were about to say would knock the air out of him. Harry sat. The chair creaked. And the voice continued. What was said next has been pieced together from 3 separate sources. All of whom heard different parts of the aftermath. All of whom described Harry's reaction in nearly identical terms. Shock. Disbelief. Then panic. Because the call wasn't about one thing. It was about everything he thought was settled, suddenly not being settled at all. The voice told him there had been a development. A reversal. Something long buried had resurfaced. And it involved his past, his children, and a decision made without his consent. Harry interrupted, his voice rising. No. That's not possible. I was told it was over. The reply came instantly. You were told what you needed to hear. That's when Harry stood up. Paced. Dragged a hand down his face. This wasn't just information. This was a betrayal layered on top of every other betrayal he'd spent years trying to outrun. Let's pause here, because this is where the story splits into 2 possible realities. And both are equally devastating. According to one insider, the call came from inside the palace. Not King Charles directly, not William, but someone operating in the gray zone, a senior legal advisor tied to old royal trust structures. Someone who deals in documents, not emotions. According to another source, the call came from outside the monarchy altogether, a private intermediary representing interests Harry thought he'd severed ties with years ago. And according to a third, more controversial account, the call may have involved both. A coordinated disclosure. A controlled detonation. Because what Harry learned in those 47 seconds, yes, the call lasted exactly 47 seconds, fundamentally shattered his sense of safety. Here's what the insiders agree on. The call informed Harry that certain protections he believed were permanent were never legally binding. That arrangements surrounding his children, Arrangements he believed were settled, locked, and agreed upon were being quietly revisited. Not publicly, not in court, but through mechanisms most people never see. Trust amendments, jurisdictional loopholes, old agreements written in language vague enough to be reinterpreted decades later. Harry reportedly asked one question. Does Meghan know about this? There was a pause, and then the answer. She's already been informed. That's when his legs gave out. People often imagine breakdowns as explosive, loud, chaotic. This wasn't that. This was the slow collapse of someone realizing they were never really in control. Harry sank back into his chair. His hand was shaking so badly, he nearly dropped the phone. You said this was finished, he whispered. You said my family would be left alone. The response? No one said forever. Think about that for a second. Imagine being told, after years of therapy, public sacrifice, and walking away from everything you've ever known, that the past still has its hooks in you. That the institution you fled can still reach into your life whenever it chooses. That your children are not as insulated as you believed. That the deal was never the deal. When the call ended, Harry didn't scream. He didn't throw the phone. He just sat there, motionless, for nearly 20 minutes. Staff later said they thought he'd fallen asleep, until they noticed tears sliding silently down his face, dripping onto the desk. He didn't wipe them away. He didn't react. He just stared at the wall, eyes unfocused, breathing barely audible. And then he stood up, walked into the hallway. And that's when the collapse you heard about finally happened. But here's the part no one's talking about. The contradiction. Because while Harry was unraveling, emotionally, psychologically, someone else was already preparing for the fallout. Someone who knew the call would push him over the edge. Someone who had positioned themselves just far enough away to avoid the blast, but close enough to benefit from the chaos. And that brings us back to Meghan. Remember where she was when Harry collapsed? Austin, Texas. But what most people don't know is that she received a call too. Not at the same time. Earlier. Hours earlier. Sources claim Meghan was informed of the development during a private meeting, one she cut short immediately afterward. She didn't panic. She didn't cry. According to one witness, she simply said, "So it's moving faster than we thought." Faster than we thought. Let that sink in. Because if that's true, and multiple accounts suggest it is, then Meghan knew something Harry didn't. She had time to process it. Time to prepare. Time to decide what her next move would be. And Harry? He was left to absorb it alone. This is where the emotional imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. Harry processes trauma internally. He always has. He shuts down, withdraws, replays old memories on a loop. Meghan? She strategizes, plans, moves forward. Neither approach is inherently wrong. But when combined, under pressure, they can become explosive. And that day, they did. Back at the clinic, hours after the call, staff attempted to gently question Harry about what triggered his episode. At first, he refused to speak. Then, suddenly, he said something that stopped the room cold. They told me I was safe. They told me my children were safe. And now they're moving the pieces again. Moving the pieces. That phrase appears again and again in internal notes. Because to Harry, this wasn't personal. It was a game, a board, a strategy being played by people who never stopped seeing him as expendable. And then, he asked for William. Not Meghan, not his therapist, not his security detail. William. That request alone set off alarms. Because Harry hadn't spoken to his brother directly in months. And yet, in his most fragile moment, it was William he reached for. Why? Because deep down, Harry still believes one thing. That William knows things he doesn't. That William has access to the truth, the unfiltered truth, the kind that never makes it into press briefings or memoirs. And that belief, it may be what finally brings them back together, or tears them apart for good. But before William could even arrive, something else happened. Something unexpected. Something that suggests this entire crisis may have been engineered. Because shortly after Harry's breakdown, a new message was sent, not to him, but about him. A message that would eventually reach the palace. And when it did, it changed how King Charles viewed the situation entirely. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about Harry's mental health. It was about leverage. And who was using it? But what came next would expose a hidden chain of decisions stretching back years. Decisions made in silence, behind closed doors, with consequences no one was prepared to face. And once you hear who authorized that phone call, nothing about this story will feel accidental again. Where was Meghan Markle when Prince Harry collapsed? That's the question echoing louder than any official statement, any palace press release, or any damage control interview. Because in the exact moment her husband was reportedly half-conscious, mumbling about betrayal and surveillance in a private psychiatric clinic, Meghan was photographed smiling on the tarmac of a Texas airstrip. And that single image, a carefully styled silhouette with dark sunglasses and a designer tote, launched 1,000 questions. Was she avoiding him? Was she blindsided? Or was she one step ahead? Let's start with the timeline. 7:52 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Montecito, California. Harry's team begins its day with an unusually quiet start. No media updates. No Zoom call scheduled. Aides report a weird energy in the house, like everyone was bracing for something, but no one could say what. Harry, as we now know, was already spiraling. 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Montecito driveway. A sleek, unmarked vehicle arrives. Meghan steps out, dressed sharply in a navy blouse and cream blazer. She's carrying 2 phones, one personal, one encrypted. No luggage, just a carry-on and a clutch. She doesn't speak to the staff. She doesn't kiss Harry goodbye. She simply says, "Tell him I'll call when I land." Then she leaves. Now, here's where it gets murky. According to one former staffer, Meghan had already been briefed about the upcoming phone call Harry would receive, the one that would eventually break him. She knew it was coming. She knew the timing. She may have even approved it. But rather than stay by Harry's side, she chose to fly out. Destination? Austin, Texas. Publicly, the trip was attributed to a supposed surprise pop-in at a women's empowerment event. But private sources say the visit had another layer. A confidential business meeting related to a solo multimedia deal. And that deal was reportedly designed without Harry's involvement. Let that sink in. As Harry unraveled, Meghan was photographed inside a luxury SUV, typing furiously into her phone, lips pursed. Aides seated beside her. One source claims she was reviewing a pitch deck. Another says she was requesting revisions to a project trailer. Both agree on one thing. Her mind was not on Harry. So what changed? Because here's where things take a sharp emotional turn. 10:11 a.m. Central Standard Time, Austin, Texas. Meghan arrives at a boutique hotel. No check-in needed. The room had been reserved for days under a different name. She's led upstairs, not by hotel staff, but by private security. And the moment the door closes behind her, she breaks. One insider, someone who claims to have heard the audio from a hotel surveillance system, says Meghan made a phone call the minute she entered. The first words out of her mouth, "Has it started yet?" There's a pause. Then Meghan allegedly says, "Don't let him spiral." Not like last time. She doesn't sound frantic. She sounds practiced, as if this wasn't the first time she's navigated Harry through a breakdown. And according to that same insider, Meghan then requested to go radio silent for the next 5 hours. No press contact. No Instagram. No calls with Harry. Just silence. Now here's the twist. Back in Montecito, Harry's condition is deteriorating. He's pacing. Mumbled phrases about betrayal, documents, Diana, William. He collapses. The private medical team is activated. But no one can reach Meghan. Calls go unanswered. Texts are seen but not replied to. Even her mother, Doria Ragland, reportedly tries to reach out and gets redirected to voicemail. A key staff member allegedly says aloud, "Where the hell is she?" But Meghan wasn't hiding. She was making moves. 2:34 p.m. Central Standard Time. A discreet lunch meeting. According to leaked calendar entries, Meghan had a midday lunch scheduled with 2 high-level executives from a major streaming platform, one that had reportedly passed on earlier joint projects with the Sussexes. But this time, Meghan was pitching solo. No Harry and Meghan branding, just the Meghan Markle project. What was on the table? A docu-series. Not about royalty, not about lifestyle, but about resilience. Her own. Multiple leaks suggest Meghan presented herself not as a duchess, but as a woman overcoming betrayal, exile, and institutional trauma. Sources say her tone was polished, focused, measured. She spoke about motherhood, legacy, reinvention, and noticeably, she spoke about Harry only once. Just once. And when she did, it was in the past tense. I think he needed to step away to find himself. We're both evolving. Not we are evolving. Not he is growing. But he needed. Past tense. Did she already know something had shifted? Or was this the beginning of her emotional exit? Meanwhile, at the clinic, Harry was being sedated. By this point, he'd begun to experience what professionals describe as dissociative regression, reverting to childhood speech patterns, referencing events that never occurred, confusing present and past. One nurse was overheard saying, "He thinks he's back in Eton. He keeps asking for his mother." Another reported Harry whispering, "She left too. She always leaves when it gets loud." When asked who she was, he refused to answer. But they didn't need to guess. The symbolic betrayal, a missed call from Meghan. Later that evening, after Harry had been stabilized, his phone, retrieved from the estate by security, buzzed. A missed call. From Meghan. A single voicemail, no text follow-up. 7 seconds long. Just this. "I'm handling it the best I can. We'll talk when you're stronger." Then silence. No comfort. No urgency. Just distance. And now, here's where things get controversial. Because Meghan's defenders, and there are many, argue that she did exactly what she had to. That her silence wasn't abandonment, but strategy. That she's learned over the years that Harry's breakdowns can't be solved by emotional entanglement. That being there physically might only escalate things. And to some extent, that may be true. But to others, it felt cold, detached, calculated. Especially when, just 12 hours later, she was seen at a private dinner with two powerful Hollywood women, laughing over wine, appearing unbothered. No ring. No Harry. No crisis in sight. Here's the deeper question. Was Meghan distancing herself from Harry or protecting something bigger? Because behind closed doors, another theory began circulating. That Meghan's team was advised, perhaps legally, to create distance between her and Harry in the event of an involuntary mental health commitment. That's right. There were whispers, unconfirmed, but persistent, that should Harry's episode escalate, Meghan didn't want to be seen as responsible. Because if Harry was declared mentally unfit, custody could be challenged. Assets could be reviewed. Public narratives could shift. And so silence, distance, calculated absence. Let's zoom out. Because this is no longer just about one phone call or one emotional collapse. This is about two people navigating the wreckage of a story they thought they were writing together and now may be finishing apart. For years, they stood as a united front, escaping the firm, building a media empire, raising their children far from the crown. But now, Harry is in a clinic, and Meghan is in a boardroom, and between them, an ocean of unspoken resentment, misunderstood intentions, and decisions that may have been made long before either of them realized this chapter was ending. But here's the most chilling detail of all. Just hours after Meghan returned to Los Angeles, a new document was filed. A sealed legal submission, untraceable to the public, but flagged by royal legal teams. Marked, urgent, family transition. Its contents? Still unknown. Its implications? Terrifying. Because some believe that document could be the beginning of the end. A legal prelude, a structured disentanglement, not just of a marriage, but of an identity. And as the sun rose over Montecito the next morning, Harry awoke in a padded room, asking a nurse a question that made her stop in her tracks. Did she leave a note? She hadn't, but someone else did, and it would change everything. Because the note wasn't from Meghan. It was from William, and what it said would reopen wounds that never really healed. The monarchy has survived wars, divorces, tabloid scandals, and abdications. But nothing terrifies the firm more than a royal unraveling with no leash, especially when it comes with cameras pointed at the cracks. So when the call came in, a discreet alert from a private medical contact confirming Prince Harry's full admission into a psychiatric facility, King Charles didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for clarification. He didn't request details. He didn't even ask how Harry was doing. Instead, he uttered one word: lockdown. And within seconds, the wheels began turning. The Alabaster Protocol, a royal emergency response code. Very few people even know it exists. Fewer still have the clearance to initiate it. But those inside the deepest circles of Buckingham Palace know it by heart. Alabaster, a code phrase used only in situations where the emotional or physical stability of a senior royal threatens to compromise the image, structure, or continuity of the crown. It's not a health protocol. It's not for public safety. It's for control. Because if the public sees a royal, especially one as globally visible as Harry, in a state of psychological collapse, it doesn't just damage reputations. It shakes the myth. And monarchies do not survive without myths. 7:08 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, Buckingham Palace Situation Room. By the time Charles finished his breakfast briefing, 3 teams had been activated. Communications, tasked with issuing a vague, empathetic statement. One that said everything and nothing. Legal, reviewing all existing NDAs, privacy agreements, and gag clauses tied to Harry, Meghan, their staff, and associates. Digital response, scrubbing real-time data, intercepting metadata, and shadow banning any trending terms that included Harry plus clinic in the same sentence. Within minutes, hashtags were disappearing from social platforms. Reddit threads vanished mid-conversation. A tweet that garnered over 2.1 million views in under 15 minutes? Gone. Wiped. Not reported, erased. Because this wasn't just PR. This was containment. Behind closed doors, the king's true reaction. Now, here's where things get complicated. Because while Charles acted swiftly and with institutional discipline, insiders say his personal reaction was far more volatile. One palace staffer, who had access to the call logs, claims Charles slammed the receiver down after the 3rd update. He said something like, "I warned him. I said this would happen." And still, he insisted on playing the victim. There was no compassion in his voice, only frustration, exhaustion, and fear. Not the kind of fear a father feels. The kind of fear a monarch feels when the seams of his family threaten to tear in public. Camilla's involvement, Queen or crisis manager. Multiple sources confirm that Queen Camilla immediately inserted herself into the situation, but not as a supportive partner, as an operator. She's the one who drafted the emergency media lines, one insider revealed. Charles was emotional. She was clinical. Camilla allegedly told the team, "We say it's exhaustion, stress, maybe altitude sickness, but not breakdown. Never breakdown. That word doesn't enter the building." She's no stranger to scandal management. Her own past prepared her well. But what she understood, perhaps better than anyone else in the room, was this. If Harry spiraled publicly, the entire modern monarchy would follow. Because if he's unstable, then what was the point of the firm's silence? Of the exile? Of the entire duty over drama narrative? It would all collapse. So she issued an order of her own. Get to Meghan. Now, back-channel to Montecito, the pressure campaign begins. The palace doesn't call Meghan directly anymore. Too risky. Too many leaks. Too many recordings. Instead, they reach her through couriers. Media intermediaries, stylists, ex-colleagues who still owe favors, crisis PR agents who don't appear on payroll. And this time, they sent a very simple message. Contain this, or we go nuclear. What does that mean? Well, according to a source close to the palace's legal arm, the threat was crystal clear. Reopen financial audits tied to Meghan's business projects. Re-examine the official timeline of their departure from royal duties. Revisit security arrangements and expenses during their time in Canada. And worst of all, re-release internal documents that had been buried to protect the couple from deeper scrutiny. In short, silence Harry, or the palace tells the world everything. Meanwhile, inside the clinic, a note arrives. Amidst all this chaos, a discreet delivery is made to the facility where Harry is recovering. It's not a gift. It's not a legal document. It's a letter, on thick Windsor stationery, marked with the royal seal. Not from Charles, not from Camilla, from William. Clinic staff were instructed not to open it. But according to a leak from inside the facility, a nurse accidentally saw the first line as Harry unfolded the paper. It read, "I didn't want it to happen like this." There's no official confirmation of what the rest of the letter contained. But moments after reading it, Harry reportedly suffered a full-blown panic episode. Security was called. He was sedated again. And the note was quietly retrieved by a royal aide flown in from London. No copies. No scans. Gone. As if it never existed. Royal press statement, cold and calculated. At exactly 10:02 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, the palace issued its public-facing response. It read, "The Duke of Sussex is currently resting following a minor health matter exacerbated by travel fatigue. The family requests privacy during this time. No mention of hospitalization. No mention of mental health. No word from Meghan. Just enough to signal that something happened, but not enough to trigger a frenzy." Or so they thought, because within minutes, independent journalists and social media detectives were picking apart every word. And one name kept reappearing: Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry's involvement, ally or liability. The man who once lent Meghan and Harry his home during their royal exit suddenly found himself back in the narrative. Why? Because sources claimed Harry had reached out to him just days before the breakdown. Not for a favor, not for housing, for help. It's alleged that Harry asked Tyler to store certain items, digital recordings, handwritten journals, and sealed legal documents, in a secure location outside the UK and California. A just-in-case archive. Insurance. Which begs the question, what was Harry so afraid of being erased? And why didn't Meghan stop him? Meanwhile, the gag order expands. By nightfall, NDAs were being reissued. Staff were being reminded of their obligations. Emails were deleted. Google Docs vanished. Even private calendars synced to the Sussex team's inner circle were wiped clean. The goal? Obliterate the trail. Because if the truth came out, the full truth, the palace knew what it would expose. The emotional deterioration of a prince left unsupported. The shocking lengths taken to silence him. The manipulation of mental health narratives to protect reputations. And worse, the possibility that Harry was right all along about the cruelty, the institutional gaslighting, the disregard for emotional well-being. But none of that could be allowed to reach the public. Not if the monarchy was to survive this decade. But here's the twist no one expected. Someone inside the palace wasn't on board with the cover-up. An unnamed aide, reportedly close to Charles, began leaking again. Not full documents, just whispers. And one line, reportedly uttered by the king himself, has now begun circulating among underground royal watchers. If he opens his mouth again, he'll lose everything. Those were the king's words. About his son. And that line, chilling in its finality, may have been the match that lit the next fire. Because Harry didn't just read William's note. He responded. Not on paper, not with words, but with a recording. A voice memo, made on a hidden device. Sent to one person. Someone with the power to broadcast it across the world. And the minute that person heard it, they booked a flight to Montecito. Because the story was no longer about Harry's breakdown. It was about a cover-up and a truth that refused to stay buried. What if I told you that within 48 hours of Prince Harry's collapse, someone had already leaked parts of his medical file? Not to the press, not to the palace, but to an independent whistleblower. And what those records revealed wasn't just exhaustion. It wasn't just anxiety. It was a psychological fracture so deep, it raised urgent questions about how long Prince Harry had been quietly suffering, and how much Meghan, the palace, and even Harry himself had tried to hide. Because the diagnosis scribbled at the bottom of page 3 wasn't just unexpected, it was devastating. Let's start with the leak. For pages, that's all that made it out before the system lockdown swept the clinic. For pages, watermarked internally, showing key portions of Prince Harry's intake summary, physician notes, and preliminary diagnosis. They were never meant to be seen. They were supposed to be locked under medical privilege, sealed behind NDAs and high-grade encryption. But a junior technician, someone tasked with verifying patient metadata, saw the name. Not the alias used by staff, Mr. H. Mount. The real name, Henry Charles Albert David. And in that moment, they made a copy, encrypted it, and sent it to someone they trusted, a therapist with a conscience and a history of speaking out against royal institutions. That therapist passed it to a journalist, who passed it to us. The initial observations, more than a panic attack. The intake summary begins calmly. Patient arrived via private medical transport, accompanied by security detail. No visible injuries. Initial assessment: dissociation, disorientation, verbal fragmentation. So far, standard for a high-stress emotional event. But by paragraph 3, the language shifts. Patient demonstrating cyclical regression, repeating traumatic phrases tied to childhood bereavement. Insists mother is hiding or being kept from him. shows resistance to present orientation techniques. And then the key line. Symptoms suggest compound PTSD with possible dissociative identity features. Urgent psychiatric stabilization recommended. Compound PTSD. Dissociative features. In simpler terms, Harry wasn't just dealing with depression or panic. He was dealing with layers of unhealed trauma, stacked on top of each other like bricks in a collapsing wall. And those bricks included grief, betrayal, exile, surveillance, abandonment, and public shame. But it gets darker. On page 2, the attending physician notes something deeply unsettling. Patient intermittently references a shadow organization tracking his movements, manipulating his life decisions, and threatening his children's safety. At first, staff considered paranoia, but then they discovered something else. Harry had brought a file with him, a sealed manila envelope, clutched in his hands even during sedation. Inside, photos, printouts, handwritten notes. The contents were redacted from the leak. We don't know exactly what they were. But the summary includes this line. Patient believes envelope contains proof of betrayal by multiple parties including spouse, brother, and former security staff. That's not just paranoia. That's obsession. Which leads us to the third and most disturbing entry, the Meghan section. Midway through page 3, the intake team documents the moment Harry was asked about Meghan. Not directly. Just, is your wife aware you're here? The notes describe an emotional reaction. Patient became visibly agitated. Eyes welled. Repeated the phrase, she said I'd be stronger if I was alone. Let that line sink in. She said I'd be stronger if I was alone. Was it metaphorical? Literal? A quote from a past fight? A goodbye message? No one knows for sure. But the way Harry said it, and repeated it, suggests it stuck. Hard. Because those weren't just words to him. They were abandonment. And when the staff pressed further, asking if Meghan was on her way, Harry responded, she's not coming. This isn't her story anymore. 8 words. 8 words that say more than any interview ever could. The unspoken diagnosis, what the palace fears most. Now, here's where the report becomes radioactive. Because by the end of page 4, the medical team offers a chilling conclusion. Patient exhibits symptoms consistent with clinical dissociation, recurrent trauma exposure, unresolved complex grief, and possible covert emotional abuse dynamics. Yes, you read that right. Covert emotional abuse. Now let's be clear. This is not a final diagnosis. It's not an accusation, but it is a red flag. A warning that the environment around Harry may not be as stable or as supportive as previously presented to the public. In fact, one comment in the margin, initialed by a senior doctor, reads, we must consider whether current relational dynamics are contributing to decompensation. Decompensation, the collapse of emotional coping mechanisms. In plainer terms, the people around Harry may be part of the reason he broke. Why the palace moved so fast to bury this. You might be wondering, why issue a gag order? Why lock down a clinic? Why panic? Because this wasn't just about privacy. It was about optics. Imagine the headlines. Prince Harry suffering possible psychological abuse. Clinic hints at emotional neglect by Meghan Markle. Royal insider. He's been unraveling for months. The firm couldn't afford it. Neither could Meghan. So the files were scrubbed. The junior tech was reassigned. The attending physician was flown to Dubai under a new consulting contract. And the therapist who received the leak reportedly fled the UK, but not before releasing one final statement. I've treated soldiers, victims of terrorism, children of war. Prince Harry carries the trauma of all 3. The voice memo that changed everything. Now remember the recording from the end of the last chapter? The one Harry made before being sedated again? It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. Just 41 seconds. But in it, Harry speaks calmly, quietly, like someone talking to a camera he hopes no one else will see. Here's a transcript of what we were able to confirm. If you're hearing this, it means they've taken me offline. I don't know who to trust, but I need the world to know it wasn't just me. It was all of us. The boys. Mummy. Even her. It's a pattern. It repeats. And if I stay silent, it wins. Who did he send it to? We can't say for certain. But a flight manifest confirms that a BBC journalist known for breaking royal scandals landed in California the next day. And that journalist? was seen entering a secure compound in Montecito. 3 hours later, they emerged looking pale, visibly shaken. When asked if they had spoken to Harry, they said nothing. But the very next morning, a subtle phrase appeared in a BBC editorial buried deep in the lifestyle section. The monarchy may not collapse with a scream, but it might dissolve with a whisper. That wasn't coincidence. That was warning. And now, the clinic's silence breaks. In a development no one saw coming, a second whistleblower from the facility reached out to a private podcast anonymously. Their voice was altered, their name withheld, but they made one thing clear. He's not crazy. He's traumatized, and they're not trying to help him. They're trying to erase the symptoms before he talks. Then they ended with a line that will haunt this story forever. They're not afraid of him breaking. They're afraid of what he remembers when he does. Because the real danger isn't Harry's mental health. It's what he knows, what he's pieced together, what he's ready to say, and who he's ready to say it to. But the question now is, will they let him? Or will someone silence him? For good? What if the very walls of Harry and Meghan's Montecito mansion could talk? What if the sanctuary they believed to be private, peaceful, untouchable, had been watching them the entire time? And not just watching, recording. Because deep within the sprawling estate, tucked behind hedges and state-of-the-art gates, lies a chilling truth. There were cameras, there were microphones, there were secrets, and someone made sure they were never meant to be found. Until now. Let's rewind. Montecito was supposed to be a fresh start, a break from the palace, a place for their children to grow freely, a home for healing, growth, love. That was the narrative. That was the promise. But the truth is far more sinister. Because according to two separate security consultants who reviewed early footage of the property when it was purchased in 2020, certain surveillance systems were already embedded deep into the infrastructure. Not installed by the real estate team. Not requested by Harry or Meghan. Already there. Wired. Hidden. Activated. And no one told them. Discovery Day, the Whispering Wall. The revelation came during what was supposed to be a routine tech upgrade. Harry had requested a new child monitoring system. Something simple, non-invasive. Just baby cams for Archie and Lilibet. A subcontractor was brought in from LA. They ran a routine scan for existing signals before installing new hardware. That's when they saw it. A foreign signal pinging from the West Wing. Encrypted. Silent. Active. The technician paused, confused. It wasn't part of the existing Wi-Fi mesh. It didn't show up on their Nest, Ring, or internal server. It was something else. A third-party device, bouncing off a masked server somewhere in Nevada. The tech flagged it. Harry was notified, and that's when the blood drained from his face. The investigation begins, layer by layer. Harry immediately called in private security specialists. People he trusted from his time in the military. They swept the house. The report? 6 embedded audio devices. 3 miniature cameras. 2 infrared motion trackers. Some hidden behind wall art. Some behind electrical sockets. 1. This part is terrifying. Hidden inside a children's stuffed animal in the nursery. The team concluded that these devices had likely been installed during the house's renovation, before the Sussexes moved in. Which begs the question, who put them there? And why? Theory 1. Paparazzi tactic gone too far? That's the first thought that came to mind. Meghan, ever media savvy, suspected some ultra-invasive tabloid attempt. After all, they've lived through drones, car chases, and long-lens stalkers hiding in trees. But these devices weren't low-tech. They were military-grade, encrypted, hardwired, designed not just to record, but to stream. Not to TMZ, not to the Daily Mail, to somewhere much more private. To someone who already knew what they were looking for. That's when Harry asked the question that chilled the entire room. What if this has been going on since we got here? The recovered footage, a betrayal caught on camera. Now here's where the story gets dangerous. The footage recovered, only fragments before the stream was cut, reportedly showed 2 things. Harry alone in his office, late at night, reviewing old letters, speaking softly into a recorder. Meghan, pacing in another room, on a call, frustrated, not knowing she was being recorded. And what she said on that call changed everything. He's slipping. He still clings to them. If he doesn't let go of that past, he'll never become what we planned. The them she referenced? Insiders believe it referred to William, Charles, the institution, maybe even Diana. Harry watched that clip 5 times. Then he left the room. No one knows what he said after that. But later that evening, he deleted every video project proposal from his joint drive with Meghan. He also began transferring files to an encrypted USB, the same one believed to be hidden in the envelope he brought to the clinic. The staff confession: we were told not to interfere. The real kicker? A former staffer, speaking under deep anonymity, admitted that several team members had suspected unusual surveillance patterns in the house. One said, "Sometimes the baby monitor would flicker when they weren't using it. We'd hear faint echoes of conversations that weren't in the room we were in. But when they raised concerns, they were told, don't interfere, don't ask, don't log it." Why? Because allegedly, Meghan had been informed, at least partially, about a test system being run on the property as part of a media training initiative. She reportedly dismissed it as harmless. But Harry was never told. Which brings us to the second theory. Theory 2. Internal documentation for future use. There's growing speculation that certain moments were being recorded not by enemies, but by the Sussex team themselves. For control, for PR leverage, for future storytelling. Think about it. How many high-profile memoirs, documentaries, or exposés are based on private moments caught on tape? What if those moments weren't accidents? What if someone, maybe not Meghan directly, but someone close to her, believed having raw footage of Harry's emotional spirals could be useful someday? That theory gains traction when you look at the storage patterns. The audio wasn't just streamed. It was archived, clipped, labeled, cataloged, tags included. Harry breakdown March 2022. Phone call with Tyler Perry, urgent. Archie crying, background yelling. This wasn't random. It was curated, which leads to an even darker possibility. Theory 3. Insurance. Could the recordings have been kept as leverage? In the event of a divorce? A custody battle? A split in narrative? A way to control the public perception? We're not saying Meghan orchestrated this, but someone, somewhere, thought it was worth having these files just in case. And now, some of them are gone. Deleted. Wiped. Vanished. But not all. Because before the purge, a backup was made by the tech subcontractor who discovered the surveillance system. And after the news of Harry's hospitalization broke, they went silent. Until today. The message from the technician, one sentence. Late last night, an encrypted message was sent to a royal journalist's burner inbox. No name. No attachments. Just one line. There's one clip he hasn't seen. If he does, it might destroy everything. What's in the clip? We don't know. Not yet. But speculation is rampant. Some say it shows Meghan making decisions without Harry's knowledge, related to their brand, their children, or even his security. Others whisper that it reveals a conversation with a senior palace insider, proving ongoing back-channel negotiations that Harry knew nothing about. And the most explosive theory? That it shows a staged fight, manufactured for documentary cameras, designed to elicit sympathy, but captured by a second, unauthorized feed from the hidden cameras. Which, if true, would be catastrophic. Because it would mean the very authenticity of the Sussex narrative, the cornerstone of their new life, was manipulated from the inside. The missing minutes, erased or hidden. One final twist. When Harry's team attempted to retrieve the entire surveillance backup, they were told 3 segments were corrupted, and each of those segments occurred during key moments of emotional tension between Harry and Meghan, including the night after Harry's final call with William, the morning Meghan was seen packing alone, the day Archie reportedly asked, "Why don't we see Grandpa?" Coincidence? Or cover-up? We may never know. But Harry's next steps suggest he's no longer asking for answers. He's preparing to give them. His final move before the breakdown. Just before being sedated at the clinic, Harry reportedly asked a nurse, "Can someone call my lawyer? Ask him to send the footage to her father. He'll know what to do." Her father. He didn't mean Meghan's. He meant Diana's confidant. A man who has never gone public. A man who once promised her he'd protect the boys, even from themselves. And now, he holds the key to a hard drive that may hold the real story of what happened behind Montecito's walls. But what he does with it could change everything. Because the next time we hear Harry's voice, it might be in court, and the first witness could be a stuffed bear with a camera in its eye. Who was really on the other end of that line? That's the question everyone keeps asking. And it's the one question the palace refuses to answer. Because phone calls don't usually destroy people. Words do. And this one, according to multiple insiders, didn't just wound Prince Harry. It split him open. The call came in quietly. No ringtone echoing through the Montecito estate. No dramatic interruption. Just a vibration on Harry's phone, placed face down on his desk, right beside that untouched espresso. At first, he ignored it. He'd been doing that a lot lately. Letting messages pile up, calls go unanswered, the outside world blurred into background noise. But this time, something made him flip the phone over. The screen lit up. No name. Just a number he hadn't seen in years. An international line. Encrypted. Untraceable to the public. Harry froze. This wasn't a spam call. This wasn't a PR team. This wasn't even family, at least, not officially. This was someone who knew how to reach him without leaving a trail. And that's when his breathing changed. Short. Shallow. Controlled. The way soldiers breathe when they sense incoming fire. He stared at the phone for nearly a full minute. Then he answered. The first thing he heard wasn't a voice. It was silence. Not dead air. Not static. Just someone there. Breathing. Hello. Harry said, his voice already strained. Still nothing. Then, finally, a voice came through, low, calm, deliberate. You should sit down. Those 5 words hit him like a punch to the chest. Because whoever it was didn't ask how he was. Didn't say hello. Didn't soften the moment. They knew. They knew what they were about to say would knock the air out of him. Harry sat. The chair creaked. And the voice continued. What was said next has been pieced together from 3 separate sources. All of whom heard different parts of the aftermath. All of whom described Harry's reaction in nearly identical terms. Shock. Disbelief. Then panic.